The town was proud of its predictability. Generations grew up on the same streets. Neighbors recognized one another by routine rather than name. Life moved at a pace that felt safe, unchanging, dependable. Local police handled traffic issues, noise complaints, and the occasional misunderstanding. Serious investigations were something that happened elsewhere, in bigger places with bigger problems. That belief shaped everything. It shaped how people reacted when the first report came in. And it shaped how long it took them to understand that this case would not resolve itself quietly. Because what happened didn't just challenge the town's sense of safety, it challenged its confidence. The discovery itself was simple, too simple. A local resident noticed something out of place, an absence where something should have been. At first, it seemed like an oversight, a routine issue. But as officers arrived and began documenting the scene, the lack of clear answers became impossible to ignore. There were no immediate signs pointing in any direction, no obvious starting point, no clear explanation. What unsettled investigators wasn't what they saw, it was how little they could confirm. From the beginning, the case resisted structure. Every attempt to establish a timeline raised new doubts. Statements conflicted, not dramatically, but subtly enough to matter. Investigators were forced to rely on assumptions, and assumptions, when repeated often enough, can quietly become accepted truth. This was the first turning point, not because of what was done, but because of what was left unquestioned. The department felt the weight quickly. Resources were limited, personnel were stretched thin, and expectations from the community were growing. Leadership wanted reassurance, the public wanted answers, and investigators were caught between what they knew and what they couldn't yet prove. Decisions made under pressure often feel reasonable at the time. It's only later that their consequences become clear. Amid the reports and interviews, one detail stood out. It was minor, easy to dismiss, difficult to explain. Some investigators flagged it. Others believed it complicated an already fragile case. So it was noted and then quietly set aside. Not ignored, just postponed. That decision would echo for years. Time passed without resolution. Leads slowed, attention shifted. New cases arrived. The investigation wasn't closed, but it wasn't advancing either. It entered the space between active pursuit and formal conclusion, a place where cases often stay longer than anyone expects. But this one was far from finished. Years after the initial investigation slowed, a quiet review began. Not because of public pressure, not because of new evidence, but because one investigator couldn't ignore a pattern that kept resurfacing. When older reports were compared side by side, similarities appeared. Small, easily overlooked consistencies that hadn't been obvious in isolation. Individually, they meant little. Together, they suggested intent. For the first time in years, the case felt alive again. The renewed review brought a realization that was difficult to admit. The investigation hadn't failed because of missing evidence. It had stalled because of missing questions. There was one assumption made early on that no one had challenged, not because it was proven, but because it was convenient. Once that assumption was removed, the case shifted. Suddenly, several unexplained decisions made sense. As momentum returned, so did disagreement. Not everyone believed reopening the case was necessary. Some felt it would reopen old wounds. Others worried about what it might reveal. But a growing number of investigators believed the risk was worth it. For the first time, the department openly debated its own past decisions. That conversation changed everything. The overlooked detail was finally brought back into focus. This time, it wasn't treated as a complication. It was treated as a key. When re-examined with fresh perspective, it connected gaps in the timeline that had never aligned before. It didn't solve the case on its own, but it pointed clearly toward the truth.
Advances in record analysis provided something the original investigators never had. Old logs were digitized. Archived materials were reviewed with modern tools. What emerged wasn't new evidence, but clearer evidence. Details once dismissed as insignificant now carried weight, and they pointed in a single direction. With renewed confidence, the investigation officially resumed. Leads were followed carefully, interviews were revisited with purpose, timelines were corrected. The case that once felt impossible now felt manageable. For the first time, investigators believed resolution was possible, not because everything was known, but because the right questions were finally being asked. The first assumption to fall was the most foundational. It had shaped the entire early investigation. It had guided interviews. It had influenced conclusions. And it was wrong. Once removed, the remaining evidence rearranged itself almost naturally. What once appeared fragmented now formed a coherent sequence. Investigators realized the case had never lacked answers. It had lacked perspective. With clarity came responsibility. Not blame, but accountability. The department conducted an internal review, not to assign fault, but to understand how reasonable decisions had led to lasting consequences. This was not easy. Admitting oversight required humility. Correcting the record required courage. But it also restored trust, both internally and with the community. When the timeline was reconstructed without the original assumptions, it aligned. Every movement, every delay, every silence. The sequence explained actions that once felt irrational. It clarified choices that had raised suspicion. For the first time, investigators could explain the case from beginning to end without contradiction. That was the moment they knew the truth had been reached. The renewed findings were shared quietly. Families were informed first, then officials, then, carefully, the public. Reactions were measured, not emotional. There was relief, there was validation, and there was understanding. The absence of drama spoke louder than any headline. The case status changed, not to perfectly resolved, but to accurately defined. Errors were corrected, records were updated, conclusions were rewritten. The investigation achieved something rare. It replaced certainty with accuracy, and accuracy in the end mattered more. With the truth clarified, the final phase began. Not a chase, not a confrontation, but closure. The case no longer haunted the department, it taught it. What once felt like failure became a lesson in patience, review, and responsibility. Victory didn't come loudly, it came correctly. The department released its final report quietly. No press conference, no dramatic statements, just a document, clear, thorough, and corrected. It outlined what had happened, what had been misunderstood, and what was now known. For the first time in years, the case was no longer defined by uncertainty, but by clarity. The town gathered not to argue, but to listen. Officials explained the findings carefully. Questions were answered directly. Nothing was rushed. There was no outrage, only quiet acceptance. People didn't need perfection, they needed honesty, and for the first time, they received it. The impact extended beyond the town. New review procedures were introduced. Cold case audits became standard. Assumptions were formally challenged during investigations. The case became a teaching example, not of failure, but of correction. It changed how future cases would be handled. That was its legacy. Some families visited places they hadn't returned to in years. Others chose not to. Closure didn't look the same for everyone, but it existed. Not because everything ended perfectly, but because the truth was no longer hidden. The last entry was added to the file. One sentence. Case reviewed, record corrected,
matter concluded. The file was archived, not forgotten, and the department moved forward, stronger for having looked back. Victory didn't arrive with arrests or headlines. It arrived with truth, with accountability, with understanding. This case proved something important. Justice doesn't always mean punishment. Sometimes it means correction. And sometimes the greatest resolution is finally knowing what happened.